Hi, I have just ordered a new motorbike and it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to arrive here from India, I'm informed. And the one I've decided to order is a Royal Enfield Interceptor. And I am going to get it in this colour scheme here, which is called Baker Express. And in this video, I just thought I'd go through the process I went through to get to this, because my last bike was a Kawasaki ZX6R, which is obviously very, very different. And this will be an explanation of my thought process getting to where I am now, waiting for one of these beauties to arrive. So let's start at the beginning with the Kawasaki. Here's my old Kawasaki. I sold it a couple of months before lockdown, when I wouldn't have been able to ride it anyway, which was quite lucky. It was a great machine. I absolutely loved it. It had, I think it was 1999 one. It was a G1 anyway. And it had this Remus exhaust system, and it also had the Remus headers. So it was very, it was tuned, you know. The main problems I had with it were electrics, actually. Especially at one stage when a fault developed in the kill switch up here, and at the same time a problem with the starter relay, and it was very confused because that was intermittent, that fault with the kill switch, and the starter relay, like I fitted a new one, drove it to a petrol station, filled up with petrol, and it wouldn't start. And at that stage that led to the process whereby we tracked down eventually the fault to intermittent fault on the kill switch, which basically needed a squirt of WD-40, and that was it. And that caused me all sorts of grief, that did. But as machines go, it was great when it was going, which was most of the time, 90% of the time. But there were two big things that I got bit fed up with. Well, first of all, I had it for 4 to 5 years, so you know, if you have a bike for 4 to 5 years, you tend to get used to it, you know, and you start longing for something new, which I was beginning to suffer from, because I knew the bike inside out, you know, what it could do, etc., etc. But the first thing that I started to get a bit fed up with was the riding position. You know, I'm getting on a bit now. And on these, your bum is right in the air, your feet are tucked up right underneath you with a very acute angle on your knee, which is what we call a driver triangle. And there was a lot of weight on your wrists. These clip-ons are really quite low. And there was a lot of weight on your wrists. So you would go along, you'd be going along head first, with a lot of weight on your wrists, so you had to train yourself, you know, your core body muscles to keep the weight off your wrists by keeping yourself not so scrunched up. And your legs would get pretty, you know, that was not all that comfortable. It's not as extreme as some sport bikes, but it was still enough to make it uncomfortable after an hour or so. And also it produced a situation where I can best describe it. If you're sat down in a chair, if you lean forward and then look up, so your neck was cricked upwards the whole time. You're going along head first, and and that is not a comfortable position on your neck. Your neck starts to ache. At least that's what I found, anyway. And so I got fed up with that. A bit fed up with that. again, I should explain. The bike was hugely enjoyable to ride, but it had these drawbacks. The second big thing that I started to get a bit fed up with was the environment I was riding it in. Now, around here, although it's rural, in England is so heavily populated that even in rural areas, you can only go along for a few miles, if you stick to the B roads or A roads, before you hit a village and speed restrictions. And as time's gone on, I've watched, unrestricted roads get more and more restricted, and cameras appeared. Then cameras started appearing more and more. So you've got to be dead careful that you don't get points on your license. And this bike is the sort of bike, the ZX6R, that puts your license in danger. I mean, I well remember the first time I took it out, like being very, very tentative. And I went down the Breeden Road on it because, I didn't know the feel of the gearbox or anything like that. I was just getting used to it. And I gently went up to 6th gear. I looked at the speedo and I was doing 85. And that was riding it really restrained on my first ever ride. And it's the sort of bike, because it only starts, like what this bike is designed to do when it was designed, was to go as quickly as possible around a racetrack. Right, and I was finding myself riding it, and even when I got out on the A and B roads, and I could come across a clear stretch, that I could sort of open her up a bit on, it never ever lasted for long. It only ever lasts a minute or something like that, a couple of minutes, and you hit another village or a town. Around here, anyway, there are parts of the UK that are less populated, but you've got to go quite a long way for it. And this is sort of bike that, as you're riding along, it pushes you to go faster. Because to be quite honest, it only really starts work. You can feel it all working and coming together, at about 90 miles an hour upwards. That's when it's in its happy zone, with lots and lots of revs, going nice and quickly, and the suspension and the feeling and the engine, everything starts working together. Now that's, way beyond the UK speed limits. And it was the sort of bike, because it was so revvy, that really wanted to push you to go faster, which made it kind of unsuitable for the environment I'm in. And that was the three main points, really. It was unsuitable for the environment, it was uncomfortable, and I'd had it 4 years anyway, 4 or 5 years, and it just became time for a change, really. I mean, they make great track bikes. You could take. I kept it for 4.5 years, and I sold it for £100 less than I paid for it. So, apart from tax, insurance, and petrol, those were basically my costs to enjoy riding this bike for 4.5 years. And I didn't ride it all that much, to be honest. I don't know what my petrol bill for a year was. Probably well under a couple of £100. And the last year I had it, I didn't ride it very much at all, because as the traffic got more and more and more, it got less and less fun. So that was the reason I decided that my time with the Quack was coming to an end. Yeah. And so I decided I needed a totally different bike. And this is the one I chose. Now, the Quack was a 4-cylinder inline Japanese high-revving twin. High revving inline 4, right? Which is classic Japanese sports bike territory. The Interceptor is a parallel twin. And when you look at it, if you know anything about bikes or anything about their history, anything at all, you look at that and you think, British bike. It's a parallel twin. It looks like that. that is a British bike. And in a sense it is, of course, because Royal Enfield, I think they're actually the world's oldest um, motorcycle manufacturer. But just like nearly every other UK-based motorcycle firm, they went bust in the 70s when the Japanese came up with bikes originally that looked very much like this. They were parallel twins and what have you, copies of British bikes. But the big difference being that they didn't leak oil, they were reliable, which is another big difference. And they had brakes that worked and stuff like that. And they were very, very quick. They were a lot quicker than the stuff that the Brits have been churning out. Milestone bikes would be the Honda Inline 4 they released, and the Kawasaki H2, even though that was a two-stroke, it was a two-stroke triple. It used to go like stink. The Yamaha RD250 and RD350, these were way beyond the capabilities of the tail end of the British motorcycle industry. Even the later Triumphs, even though I love the Triumphs, I love the later Triumphs from Meriden and what have you. They just couldn't. That's what killed them off. They couldn't compete. I mean, simple as that, really. And the Japanese just manufactured quicker, more reliable bikes, electrics too. Don't forget. Jesus. Yeah. So this one is in fact made in India. Now, Royal Enfield have been very, very clever. They built a whole new factory to address quality concerns, shall we say, from their previous range. And they have opened a research and development centre in England, located very close to the Triumph factory, for some strange reason. And they also acquired a British Harris Performance, right, who are frame makers, who have been in business since the year dot, and they make very well regarded frames, and they designed the frame for this bike. Yeah, Harris Performance. And as well as the grasp they appear to have got on quality control in India, because remember, in India, you had a market that since independence, really, simplifying it, was completely protected from imports. So Royal Enfield churning out every motorbike virtually that was sold in India. There were other Rajdoots sold some as well, but predominantly they were Royal Enfields, and they didn't have any foreign competition, so the design never changed. The metallurgy in India was always a problem. The quality of the actual metal that you were getting, I mean, that was always a problem. Enfield seemed to have addressed these parts. The bits that seem to go most often on these that they have problems with is the valves on the tyres that seem to be prone to failure. I'll be swapping them out. The core, you can swap the core of the valve out quite easily. The Seat tyres, which are Indian-made tyres, don't seem to be giving a huge amount of cause for concern, but there are replacements available from Avon, for instance, and replacement tubes as well, because these are spoke wheels. The tyre is tubed. But they come with, which makes it a big hassle to change the tyre. So if you get, a nail in the tyre out in the middle of nowhere, unless you really, really know what you're doing, you're basically stuffed under carrying a spare tube and what have you. But the bike comes with 3 years roadside assistance, which is absolutely excellent. 3 years. Now I'm sort of thinking this might be my forever bike. I'm going to make a few modifications to it. But first of all, I have to run it in before I start modding the airflow and the engine or anything like that. I'm thinking this might be, I might never get rid of this bike because it is a totally different style from the Kawasaki, right? It's a parallel twin. it has half the horsepower of the Kawasaki. It has some torque. It has torque, but it comes lower down than the Kawasaki. The Kawasaki was a rev machine, you know, like what the Kawasaki like to do is be rev like crazy. And on this one, you've got real world power, i.e. you've got torque cutting in nice and low down. It's a twin, so it doesn't rev as high anyway, because, you know, 4-cylinder engines are always going to rev of the equivalent capacity, are always going to rev much higher than twins. You know, just it's simple physics. You've got 4 smaller pistons going up and down for less distance. And these make much more, you know, because you're getting much less firing, so you get much more of a chug-chug sound than the sort of high-pitched whine, can I call it that, of a 4-cylinder engine. But you get the power nice and low down, so it's much easier, much better for in-town work. And also the riding position is totally different. It's sit up, so your head is up here, your body's here, your weight's on your bum. The pegs, the angle of your knee is much less acute, and you haven't got any weight on your wrists, so it's much more comfortable, particularly for an old codger like me. I mean, I played squash for years and years, which didn't do my back a lot of good, to be honest. In the long run, it just sort of wears bits of you out, and this is going to be considerably more comfortable for me, especially if I replace the seat with the touring option. Although there's India is a huge mine of companies making parts for this motorcycle. India is like, it's a bit like China, it's a bit like the north of England used to be, or Birmingham, you know, like loads and loads of small manufacturers churning out things. And of course the internet has made them all accessible. And there are user groups on Facebook you can join, where you can get hints and tips where to get, you know, the best bits, where to order, etc., etc. And that is it, really. That addresses my concerns. It's a lot easier to drive at low speeds in town and to filter through traffic on this than it was on the ZX6R. The seating position is a lot more comfortable. You can crack open the throttle on this and not be exceeding the national speed limit. You know, you can still have huge, because that's where the huge fun, you know, motorbikes comes from, is, you know, cracking it open. But on this, I'll be going half the speed of the Quack. Although the Quack speed was limited by the environment. You know, you can't go flat out round country roads because there's other traffic. And it's as simple as that. And yeah, I decided to get this one, the Baker Express. Now, I really like the way the Royal Enfield stands out on the tank. You can see it. In some of these new colour schemes, it's pretty knocked back, like this one. Downtown Drag, this colour scheme's called. When they first came out, I really liked the Orange Crush. I thought that was fantastic. But I want the black rims, and these come with silver rims. The Canyon Red, I like. That was second choice. And also I'd have saved a couple of £100 on the paint job. I really like that. Ventura Blue, the Quack was blue, so I wanted to move away from blue. Mark II, I don't want to be polishing all that bloody chrome, to be honest. And Sunset Strip, yeah, it's just a bit dark for my taste. And I decided this one was the best. I like the best, really. It was that, it came down to that or the red. That one. And I think the Baker Express just looks a bit classier. White, gold pinstripe, red. Very nice. And that's it, really. That is the reason why I have swapped bikes, and I am anxiously awaiting the arrival of this machine, which hopefully is being built right now in India. And then that will, of course, trigger a whole load of new YouTube videos. And it's going to be great fun, hopefully. The rides, the mods I'm going to do. I have ordered already. I'm not going to touch, as I say, I'm not going to touch performance, the engine, anything to do with air intake or anything like that until I run it in, which is 500 miles, which is it's 25 miles around Breeden Hill. So going around Breeden Hill quite a few times because it's 500-mile running period. But I have ordered Tech Bike Part adjustable levers and Tech Bike Part adjustable rider foot pegs, so I can move them forward and back 4 inches. Because another criticism of the bike is the side stand is tucked away right underneath the foot pegs, and also they get in the way when you're sort of paddling it around. The bike also comes, like unusually these days, with a centre stand, which is going to be dead useful for checking tyre pressures. I won't need a paddock stand or bobbins put on the back so that I can engage paddock stand. It's also got a fuel gauge, although reputed to be highly inaccurate, but still it's there. I'll settle for that. So that's it. That's my explainer. Another explainer is that I just love motorbikes. You know, I just love riding them, and I really, really think it's good for my health. I love getting out in the countryside. It's a way of, you know, if you've got problems or what have you, it's a way of forgetting all your problems and just concentrating on the ride, getting around. And I find it just incredibly relaxing just for that reason. It's escapism. And that's another reason why I chose this bike, is actually the cost. A brand new one cost £6,250 odd. That's what I'm paying. And the other bikes I looked at were the Triumph Trident, I'll just get that up on screen. I actually did my my first spreadsheet for many years, working out the cost. I priced out. You can price out the cost of one of these, as opposed to the Royal Enfield, on the Triumph website. You can configure it, and this actually with a slick shifter and Bluetooth module, which allows you to connect to a sort of basic navigation system, came in only about £1,000 more expensive than the Royal Enfield, with all the mods I'm going to do to it, including the engine mods, which included new cans, new headers probably. There's air filters, performance air filters and plugs and things you can add to it. And I costed them both out. And surprisingly, I think the Triumph only came out about £1,000 more expensive. But on the Trident, there is zero configuration for a passenger. You've got passenger pegs, but look what they got to sit on. And look what you've got to strap stuff to if you want to go touring. Virtually nothing. What I don't like about the Trident, styling wise, is the shape of the tank. The styling of it just doesn't do it for me. Even with this big Union Jack logo on the side, to be honest. I just don't like, it's probably got a better profile picture on the previous page. Yeah. I don't like it. I honestly don't like it. I like the retro headlamp. I don't like the shape of that fuel tank. I don't like the passenger accommodations. However, the engine, by all account, is an absolute peach. It's a triple. I've never owned a triple, and it works really, really well as a fun machine. But it's a triple. It's revvier, and although apparently it's meant to be, very manoeuvrable and everything in town, I want to go back to the thump of a twin. I decided. Very tempted by the Triumph, but given my age, given what I'm looking for, it was a close toss-up. But I decided I wanted the Royal Enfield over this. And the other one I looked at was the Street Twin. Now this came in considerably, about £3,000 more than the Royal Enfield, and it's a 900cc engine. It's considerably heavier. I much prefer the look of this to the Trident. I really do. It looks like a baby Bonnie, really, doesn't it? But I don't want to go all the way up to. Why should I go up to 900cc? I've got space limitations in my garage as well to think about. And basically, because of the price, and because it's bigger than I want for the sort of riding I'm doing, which is hobby riding, which is again why I'm reluctant to spend a lot of money on it, that got discounted. So that was my process, that was my thought process. For all those reasons, I'm carrying on motorcycling, and I'm moving from the ZX6R to one of these beauties. And to be honest, I can't wait. Okay, well, thanks very much for listening to this rambling explanation. And I'll see you next time.